You are going to sign those papers tonight, Lauren. One way or another. My mother-in-law's voice was quiet. That was what made it dangerous. Patricia Harmon had never needed to raise her voice in her life. She had other people to do her shouting for her. The smell of grilled meat and honeysuckle drifted through the open French doors of the Harmon estate. Outside, her husband Gerald was laughing with the neighbors, a sweating glass of bourbon in his hand, playing the role of generous patriarch on the 4th of July. Fireworks would start in 3 hours. The whole neighborhood would be watching the sky. No one would be watching me. I looked at the papers on the kitchen island. A modified divorce settlement. My attorney had never seen this version. The original agreement gave me fair asset division, partial custody of our daughter Nora, and maintenance payments for 24 months. This version gave me nothing. No assets, supervised visitation twice a month, a single lump sum payment of $40,000 described as a gesture of goodwill. My sister-in-law Cassandra leaned against the refrigerator with a glass of white wine, watching me the way a cat watches a bird with a broken wing. Her husband Brad was somewhere outside, probably throwing a football with my estranged husband Daniel, my son's father, the man who had handed me an invitation to his parents' 4th of July party 3 days ago and said, "Come," for Nora. She misses seeing the whole family together. I had believed him. That told you everything you needed to know about where I was 4 months into this divorce. "I'm not signing this," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. Patricia set her wine glass down with a precise click. "Then you should understand what happens next. Enlighten me." She folded her hands on the counter the way she always did when she was about to deliver a verdict. "Gerald has a relationship with Judge Haskell that goes back 30 years. The custody evaluation is scheduled for August. If you make this difficult, if you force us to litigate every single line, I promise you, the evaluation will not go in your favor. You work from home, irregular income, no family support network in the state. Meanwhile, Daniel has a stable position, a beautiful home, 2 parents who are known pillars of this community." She tilted her head. "A judge who golfs with his grandfather every Tuesday." I looked at her. I had known this woman for 6 years. She had smiled at my wedding, held my daughter at the hospital, served me coffee every Sunday morning for half a decade. And she was telling me, with the calm of someone reading a grocery list, that she would engineer the loss of my child. "So sign the papers," Cassandra said from the refrigerator, as if the conclusion were obvious. "Take the $40,000. Start over somewhere quiet. Nora will be fine. We'll make sure she knows who her mother was." "Was," I repeated. Cassandra shrugged one shoulder. Was. You know what I mean." I looked down at the papers for a long moment. I thought about what I had built over the last 5 years. In the background, in the gaps, in the early mornings while Daniel slept and Nora napped, and his family assumed I was designing logos for small businesses to keep myself occupied. I thought about the decision I had made 8 months ago, long before the divorce, when I first understood what this family truly was. The decision that had seemed extreme at the time, the one that seemed perfectly reasonable now. I picked up the pen. Patricia's posture relaxed. Cassandra straightened. I set the pen back down. "No," I said. "And before I tell you what I'm actually going to do in the next 20 minutes, I need to ask the people watching this right now, have you ever had someone look you in the eye and try to take your child from you with a smile on their face? Because what I'm about to show you is what happens when the person they underestimated spent 5 years quietly buying the ground beneath their feet. Stay with me." Patricia's expression flickered. "Just slightly." "What are you doing?" "Having a conversation," I said. "Keep up." I reached into the tote bag I had carried in from my car and placed a folder on the island, directly on top of the divorce papers. It was thin, crisp white edges. I had printed it myself that morning. "What is that?" Patricia asked. "Open it," I said. "Or don't. The math is the same either way." Gerald walked in through the back door, bourbon in hand, sunburned and jovial. "Patricia." They're about to start that he stopped when he saw my face. Then he saw the folder. "What's going on in here?" "Lauren was just leaving," Cassandra said. "Lauren was just starting," I corrected. Gerald crossed the kitchen slowly. He picked up the folder. I watched him read the first page. I had seen that specific progression of expressions before: confusion, then slow recognition, then the particular white-faced stillness that arrives when the ground shifts under a person who thought they were standing on bedrock. "This is," he started, "the acquisition summary." "Yes," I said. "Novatech Solutions completed the purchase of Harmon Capital Group's primary debt portfolio 11 days ago. Your company has been operating on a line of credit extended by a regional lending consortium for the past 3 years. That consortium was purchased by a holding company 18 months ago. I know, because I founded that holding company. And last Thursday, I called in the balance. The kitchen was completely silent except for the distant sound of children laughing in the backyard. "You're a graphic designer," Patricia said. It was the strangest thing she could have said in that moment, like she was trying to argue with gravity. "I'm the founder and majority shareholder of Novatech Solutions. We do cybersecurity infrastructure, defense contracts, private equity on the side. You probably haven't heard of us because we don't advertise, and because for the last 5 years, I made a very deliberate choice to let this family believe I was the woman who made birthday invitations and business cards while my husband brought home the real money. I let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. I needed to know what you were. Now I do. Daniel had appeared in the doorway. I had not heard him come in. He was holding a beer, and his face had gone the color of old concrete. "Lauren," he said slowly. "What are you talking about?" "She's lying," Cassandra said. Her voice had changed. The casualness was gone. "She's making this up to get out of signing. Daniel, she's lying." "Check your phone, Cassandra," I said without looking at her. "What?" "Your phone. Your work email specifically. The one your firm uses for client communications." A pause. Then the soft sound of a phone being unlocked. Then silence. Then, "This can't be right. The cybersecurity firm you work for was acquired by a Novatech subsidiary on Wednesday." I ordered a compliance review immediately following the acquisition. The review found 17 instances of billable hours fraud across 3 client accounts over the past 2 years. Your name is on 14 of them. I finally looked at her. "You're suspended pending investigation. Effective as of this morning. Your building access has already been revoked." Cassandra's wine glass slipped from her hand. It did not break. It just hit the tile and rolled, leaving a pale trail across the floor. She stared at her phone like it had spoken to her in a language she did not recognize. "Gerald," Patricia said. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had built her entire world on a single assumption and had just watched that assumption collapse. "Gerald, do something." Gerald was still holding the folder. He had not moved. "The debt on Harmon Capital's credit line comes due in 90 days, I said. "Under normal circumstances, you would extend. The consortium would roll it over. Standard practice. But I'm the consortium now, and I'm not extending." I paused. "Unless we renegotiate the divorce terms. The original ones. My attorney's version. Full custody arrangement. Asset division as written. And I want the Haskell conversation to stop. Whatever influence you think you have over that courtroom. I need it to go away." "You can't do this," Gerald said. He had found his voice again. It was different now. Smaller. "I've done it," I said. "The paperwork is complete. The acquisition is on record. The review findings are filed. I'm not threatening you, Gerald. I'm showing you a spreadsheet." Daniel set his beer down on the counter. He looked at me for a long moment, and in his face I saw something I had not expected. Not rage, not calculation, but something closer to grief. He had loved me once, or thought he had. The version of me he had loved was the woman who deferred and accommodated, and quietly made herself smaller, so he could feel larger. That woman was not in this kitchen. I almost felt something. Then I remembered the mediation session 2 months ago, when his attorney had suggested, with a straight face, that my sporadic freelance income indicated an unstable lifestyle, and Daniel had sat beside that attorney and said nothing. Almost. I was about to speak again when Patricia moved. Not toward me, toward the back hallway, toward the small sitting room where she kept the display cabinet with the family's collected valuables. I heard a drawer open, then her footsteps returned. "My brooch," she said. She was holding a small velvet pouch. Her hands were steady, which told me this was not improvisation. "My mother's sapphire brooch. It was in this cabinet an hour ago." She looked at me. Her eyes were dry and absolutely certain. Lauren was the only guest in this part of the house. There it was. I had not seen it coming, which I acknowledged privately, with the cold professional interest of someone noting a variable they had miscalculated. I had expected the Haskell play. I had expected the debt conversation. I had not expected the brooch, but I had been in this family long enough to know that Patricia Harmon did not improvise. She prepared. "She was by the cabinet when I walked past," Cassandra said. Her voice had recovered. I saw her standing near it. "I was in the kitchen the entire time I've been here," I said. "You know that." "I don't know that," Cassandra said. "I know what I saw." Brad appeared in the doorway, having materialized from wherever men like Brad went when the women were conducting business. He looked at the room, read the energy with practiced efficiency, and stood slightly behind Cassandra in the way of a man who understood exactly what his role was. "That brooch is worth $400,000, Gerald said. He had set the folder down. He was recalibrating. I could see it. Insured for $500. Theft of property over $100,000 is a Class B felony in this state. 3 to 10 years. Unless, Patricia said, and the word landed like a stone dropping into still water. "You made a mistake coming here tonight. A nervous mistake. And you return what you took. And we agree to handle this as a family matter. You sign the papers. You take the payment. You let Nora grow up stable and loved, without a mother serving time for theft. And we don't make a phone call." I looked at her for a long time. She looked back without blinking. I had spent a long time in the early years of my marriage trying to make Patricia Harmon love me. I had cooked her recipes and learned her preferences and softened my opinions in her presence, and absorbed her corrections with a smile. I had believed that if I was patient enough and gracious enough, she would eventually see me. Not as a threat to her son or an obstacle to her vision of his life, but as a person, as someone who loved what she loved. There was a specific Sunday afternoon, 3 years ago, when I finally understood that this would never happen. Nora was 18 months old. I had driven her to the Harmon house alone because Daniel was at a conference, and I wanted Nora to spend time with her grandparents. I found Patricia in the living room with her sister, going through old family photographs. I sat down beside them. Patricia's sister picked up a photo of Daniel as a child and said, "He needs a wife who came from something." She had not looked at me when she said it. Neither had Patricia. They had continued turning pages. I had picked up Nora and said I needed to get her home for her nap. I had driven home. I had sat in the car in my own driveway for 20 minutes. Then I had gone inside and opened my laptop and begun building the thing I had been building in small pieces for 2 years. The thing I had told no one about. The thing I was now using to end this. I looked at Patricia standing in her kitchen holding a velvet pouch, and I felt nothing except the cold satisfaction of a person who had finished a very long calculation correctly. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. She frowned slightly. "I'm not." The brooch. "How long have you been sitting on this as a contingency?" A pause, which was itself an answer. "You brought me here tonight knowing you would either get my signature or manufacture a criminal charge," I said. "There was no version of tonight where you let me leave without one or the other. The invitation from Daniel, the barbecue, the family atmosphere, that was all stage design." I looked at my husband. "Did you know?" Daniel said nothing. "Did you know?" I asked again, quieter this time. "Lauren," he said. "Just sign the papers. Take Nora and go somewhere. This doesn't have to be." "That's a yes," I said. There was a long moment. Outside, a child shrieked with laughter. Someone set off an early firecracker, and it popped in the warm evening air like a small, distant accusation. I reached into my tote bag again. I had been wearing a device since I walked in the front door. Small, flat, adhered below my collarbone under my shirt. Novatech's consumer security division had been developing it for 18 months. It was not yet on the market. It recorded in HD audio, synced to an encrypted cloud server in real time, and had a battery life of 14 hours. I had been wearing it since 2 o'clock that afternoon. I placed the recorder on the island. No one spoke. "Everything said in this kitchen since I arrived," I said, "is already on a server that is not in this building." The conversation about Judge Haskell, the $40,000 offer, the statement that Nora would grow up knowing who her mother was, the brooch. I looked at Patricia. "The fact that you went to retrieve it from the sitting room the moment this conversation turned against you, while Cassandra established a false witness account, while Gerald introduced the felony threshold unprompted, a man who had no reason to know the insurance value of his wife's jewelry off the top of his head, unless he had reviewed it recently." I paused. "Conspiracy to commit extortion, witness intimidation, obstruction of a custody proceeding? Those are federal matters when you involve a sitting judge." Patricia set the velvet pouch down. "You're bluffing," Brad said from the doorway. He was the first one to say it, and the tone was wrong. The tone of a man talking himself into something. "Novatech builds data security architecture for 4 federal agencies," I said. "I hold 3 security clearances. My legal team includes 2 former federal prosecutors." "I am not bluffing, Brad. I'm invoicing." The sound came from outside. Not fireworks this time. A car. Then 2 cars. Then the change in the ambient noise of the backyard that happens when strangers arrive with a certain kind of authority and the people who were laughing go quiet all at once. Daniel went to the window. "There are," he started. "Investigators," I said. "I made a call this morning. Not police. Federal. The Judge Haskell situation escalated this above the local level." I picked up my bag. "I also want to mention, before they come in, that the brooch is in the velvet pouch in Patricia's hand. She never gave it to me. She retrieved it from the sitting room in front of 4 witnesses and 1 recording device when she needed a leverage point. That will be relevant." Gerald sat down heavily on a kitchen stool. He looked like a man who had just realized the building he was standing in belonged to someone else. Which, technically, given the debt portfolio, was not entirely inaccurate. Patricia looked at me. For the first time in 6 years, she looked at me without the slight haze of dismissal that had always been there. She looked at me the way you look at something you have finally understood too late. "You've been planning this," she said, not accusatory, almost wondering. "For about a year," I said. "When your attorney filed the first motion calling my work inconsistent hobby income, I started planning specifically. Before that, I was just building a company." "You made it personal. What do you want?" she asked. And for the first time, it was a genuine question, not a negotiation tactic, not a line in a script. "I want what I always wanted," I said. "To raise my daughter. To have my work acknowledged as the work that it is. To not have my child used as a bargaining chip by people who see her as an asset in a portfolio." I picked up the original divorce agreement from the bottom of the stack, the one my attorney had drafted, the fair one. "Sign this, the original, tonight, and I will structure the debt repayment at favorable terms and I will not pursue the extortion charges." "And if we don't," Gerald said, "then the recording goes to the U.S. Attorney's office, which it is already scheduled to do at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning unless I log in and cancel the transmission. And you explained to a federal judge why you discussed using a sitting judge's friendship with your family to influence a custody evaluation. I looked at him calmly. I grew up with very little, Gerald. I know how to wait. I know how to be patient. And I know how to finish something I started. The back door opened. A woman in a dark jacket stepped in, introduced herself with a credential I did not need to hear because I already knew her name, and asked if this was a good time. I told her it was. Daniel signed first. I had not expected that. He took the original agreement from my hand and signed it at the kitchen island without speaking, without looking at his mother, without any of the theater of the last 2 hours. When he handed it back, his hand brushed mine. He started to say something. Then he didn't. Gerald signed next. Then Patricia. Cassandra did not sign anything because Cassandra had no remaining standing in the proceedings, though she would have other paperwork to deal with in the coming weeks from the compliance review at her firm. The investigator took copies and spoke quietly with Gerald in the living room, while Patricia stood at the kitchen window, looking at her backyard, at the neighbors who were still there with their children in the summer evening, at the life that would continue looking exactly the same from the outside for quite some time before it didn't. I found Nora in the backyard with her cousins, chasing a dog across the grass, her hair wild in the heat. She saw me and ran over and grabbed my hand and said, "Can we stay for fireworks?" I looked at her, 4 years old. She had my eyes and Daniel's laugh, and she had no idea what had just happened 20 feet away in her grandparents' kitchen. "Not tonight, baby," I said. "We're going to watch them from the car on the way home. Deal?" She considered this with the grave deliberation of a child evaluating a counteroffer. "Deal," she said. "But I need my juice box." We found the juice box. We said goodbye to no one in particular. I buckled Nora into her car seat, and she was asleep before we reached the highway, her head tipped sideways, one hand still holding the juice box she had insisted on, and never opened. I drove with the windows down. The first real fireworks had started somewhere to the east, and they bloomed over the tree line in colors that had no names, red and gold, and something between white and silver. Nora slept through all of it. My phone rang. My CFO. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. Then a text. "Board wants to know if you're joining the Tuesday call or delegating." I typed back, "Delegating," and put the phone face down on the passenger seat. There is a version of this story where I feel triumphant, where the music swells and the drive home is cathartic, and I arrive somewhere feeling like the final frame of a movie about a woman who won. That is not quite what it felt like. What it felt like was quiet. A specific kind of quiet that comes after something that had been taking up space in your chest for a very long time finally stops. Not celebration. Not relief exactly. Something more like the end of a noise you had gotten so used to that you had stopped hearing it, and only noticed it was gone when the silence arrived. Patricia Harmon had looked at me for 6 years and seen a liability. A woman who had married into something she wasn't entitled to. A problem to be managed. She had never seen the work. She had never seen the 5 a.m. mornings or the legal filings or the years of building something in the cracks of a life that had been structured, very carefully, to leave no room for building. She saw it now. I did not need her to have seen it sooner. I did not need her to feel a particular way about it. I just needed Nora to grow up with her mother. And I needed the people who had tried to take that to understand, with finality, that the cost had been miscalculated. That was all. 3 weeks later, the custody arrangement was entered into the court record. Nora's pediatrician noted she was happy and healthy and thriving at her 4-year checkup. My attorney sent me a very short email that said "Only clean. Congratulations." I printed it out and taped it to the wall above my desk, next to a drawing Nora had done of the two of us holding hands in front of a house, both of us with yellow circle heads and enormous smiles. The debt restructuring took another month. Harmon Capital survived, reorganized, under new terms that were fair and clearly written and nothing like the agreements Gerald had assumed he could make and unmake as he chose. He accepted them. He had no leverage left to refuse. I did not enjoy their difficulty. I want to be clear about that. There is a version of this where the point is punishment, where the win is watching people fall. That was never the point. The point was Nora. The point was the original agreement. The point was being seen as what I was instead of what was convenient for someone else's story about me. Gerald and Patricia attended Nora's birthday party in September, as the arrangement specified. Patricia brought a gift. She handed it to Nora without looking at me. I made sure there was good food and balloons, because my daughter was turning 5 and she deserved a good party, and what had happened between the adults in her life was not her weight to carry. After the party, when Nora was asleep and the streamers were still hanging in the kitchen, I sat at my desk in the quiet of my own house. Not the Harmon estate, not a studio apartment, my house, bought with my money, in my name, paid for with 5 years of work that no one in that family had bothered to ask about. I opened my laptop. I had a company to run. There is something they never tell you about being underestimated. Everyone focuses on the reveal, the moment when the room understands what you actually are. And yes, that moment has a particular satisfaction to it. I will not pretend it doesn't. But the real gift of being underestimated is the years before the reveal, the freedom of being invisible, the way people show you exactly who they are when they believe you have no power, The information that accumulates when no one is bothering to perform for you. I knew this family better than they had ever allowed themselves to know me. That knowledge was the foundation of everything I had built. They had given it to me, freely, over 6 years, because they had looked at me and decided I did not matter. I had made note of every single thing. The next morning, I made Nora pancakes with blueberries, because blueberries were her current obsession, and she sat at the counter in her pajamas and told me very seriously about a dream she'd had in which our neighbor's cat could talk and had strong opinions about breakfast foods. I listened to every word. I did not think about Gerald or Patricia, or the papers, or the recordings, or any of it. I thought about the dream, and the cat's breakfast opinions, and whether we needed more blueberries, and the way my daughter looked in the morning light before the day had started. That was the win. Not the papers, not the acquisition, not the moment Patricia Harmon finally looked at me and understood what she was looking at. This, right here, still standing, still present, still hers. That was the whole thing.